After a successful decade run as a featured documentary, Eyes of the Mothman is now a podcast containing bonus information and, for the first time ever, the complete, unedited field interview tapes with eyewitnesses, experts, and those who were directly impacted by the Mothman incidents that occurred in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 and 1967. Although this podcast is meant to act as a historical record and an archive of the events that transpired, all material contained here is not for reproduction without the written consent by the copyright holder, Redline Studios Incorporated. Episode 8 of Eyes of the Mothman brings us to John Sauer. He is an interview that we did in 2ND Way Park. It was a beautiful day that day, I remember that. And we did a very long interview with him. Anytime you interview somebody who speaks incredibly well and who is very concise and thorough, within the first couple questions, you go, "Oh, I'm gonna get everything I can out of this guy," because they just speak so well. It's like writing a voiceover for someone. Sometimes people are just great at answering questions, and I remember he was one of those people, just very articulate. John. The reason for his interview was, again, to talk about Battle of Point Pleasant, Cornstalk Curse, Silver Bridge. He knew several people who died on the Silver Bridge. He was living in the town at the time, so that was another interesting perspective, just someone who could tell you what was it like to see, to hear, to deal with the aftermath of the Silver Bridge. I think Cornstalk in our film is only about maybe 20 minutes long of a section, and we've already gone through 5, 6, maybe more interviews where we set them up by saying, well, we talked to them about Point Pleasant and Cornstalk. And you go, well, why talk to so many people? Even if it's a 20-minute section of the film, you still want multiple perspectives and opinions. You hope to find some crossover correlations, because then, that kind of helps validate the authenticity of the facts you're being given. If 5 people you interview all tell you the same story, it kind of lets you know you're on the right path of trying to find some truth and accuracy into whatever you're talking about. And I just remember John was a very intelligent, very spot on, just like historian talking about the battle in town. I mean, his knowledge of it was just, there's no reference. He's not looking in a book off camera. Like he knew this battle and this fight. And just someone you could tell very proud of his history and his town's history. No, I remember him very well. He was in front of the obelisk, I think that's there. And the poor guy, I think we were trying to change it up as far as the look goes. We were inside, we're shooting kind of lit interviews, and then ones that are outside, like the riverboat captain, we filmed him by the water and that kind of thing. So we had him by a historical kind of site that was perfect, but the sun was so bright and we had reflectors on him, and he was a good sport about it because we were just trying to, like I said, change it up. So we shot him in the middle of the day. It was pretty tough, but he was a good sport. And he was one of those guys that you could pick an American history topic from the first European that set foot on to, the end of World War II, and he would know everything about it. He just, like you said, he didn't have to refer to anything. He could give you all these details. And he could have been there all day. He could have been just talking all day long. That's funny. So I remember, sometimes with some people, you go okay, tell me your name. And then they say their name, and then they go into a 30-minute battle of point. They almost have it ready to because they're anticipating you're going to talk about it. And I think if I remember correctly, he was one of those people. And it's great. And sometimes they go, oh, sorry, I just went on for 30 minutes. You go, that's fine, because again, you can just chop it up and cut it. But he was so just well prepared and just knowledgeable in the topics we were talking about. I remember he was also a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, which is an organization. Yeah, I mean, I was just looking it up. He's actually part of the West Virginia Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. He unfortunately passed away back in 2015. I know people who are part of those kind of historical things, the reenactment people, and it's like they geek out about history. They just love it. It's just like people who are really into, baseball and people who are really into motorcycles, whatever. These people are just really, really into history, and they can't get enough of it. Yeah, and you got from John like a real sense of pride of his town and his history. And the other thing too, like what I think is interesting, I remember going into interviewing him, and it initially starts with, okay, I know you're an expert on the Battle of Point Pleasant and Cornstalk, and that's what you start to interview these people. And then you get to the end of these interviews and you go, oh, by the way, do you know anything about the Silver Bridge? And, because you just kind of don't really understand when you go out there, like the level of closeness of the region. And people just go, well, yeah, I knew 30 people, I knew 7 people that died on the bridge. Like you almost kind of are ignorant to the idea that like everyone you're probably interviewing knew someone who died on the bridge. And so you go into the interview expecting just to talk about Cornstalk and the Battle of of Point Pleasant, but then you also go, ooh, I can get some more out of this. I didn't realize you knew about the bridge and where you were and what you heard. And so we got some more out of that. And I feel like initially going in, we didn't know that he had that personal connection to the Silver Bridge, and had some friends and family that died on it.
Is he the one that we weren't supposed to interview him, and then we were supposed to interview someone in his family?
I think we were supposed to interview his brother.
And like he couldn't do it, and he's like, well, I'll do it. He
filled in for him.
Yeah.
And you go, oh man, is this going to be some black sheep brother showing up who's, a bad replacement? And he was absolutely fantastic.
No, he was very thorough and one of those people who are really interested in letting other people know the story and making sure that the history of it continued and was carried on. He just got that feeling about him that he wanted people to know.
And the great thing about him too, sometimes when you interview these people, I've said on other episodes now, you have to ask them the same question 5 times just to get a few options of how they phrase things. But then some people speak in sound bites where you go, oh, I can cut that right there. You're listening to it as they talk to you and like, oh, that's my moment. That's my little blip. And he spoke in a sound bite, which is great to where in terms of like you could let him go on and it works. You could cut it short and it works. It's just concise and thorough and put together and not rambling. And it's very good. So he was a great interview. So good memories of John Sauer, and we appreciated his interview, and it was a great contribution to our film. We hope you enjoy the raw interview with him now.
I think she's a teacher. Then we have George Washington. He always comes in and talks to the kids.
Let me know. Who was also tall.
Very tall.
Kill the speed. So I want to talk a little bit about the curse. And kind of like, there's so much talk about the curse, and it's kind of like some people believe it, some people take it really serious, some people don't. Can you tell me about the curse according to these legends? Where do they come from? Where does all this come from?
In the early 20s, there was a play performed here. A good friend of mine's mother was in that play. She was a young girl. And in the play, they mentioned the Cornstalk Curse. And it's just grown from that. Because, if a man is murdered, he doesn't have time to put a curse on the city of Point Pleasant with 7 wounds in his body. He didn't have a chance to do any cursing of any kind.
So that seems to have come from, tell me a little bit about that play, and that's kind of where we think it's been traced back to.
Well, the play, I'm not sure about it. I've got an old Gazette up at home that has that in it, about the play. And Cornstalk's Curse was in that Gazette that I have, right, telling about Cornstalk's Curse. Well, it's just been one thing after another. We've had bad luck here. When the bridge fell, that was Cornstalk's Curse. Whenever the big bird flew up here, they think that was the part of the curse. But as far as I know, there's no Cornstalk's Curse over Point Pleasant.
And you said you knew the date. Do you remember the date of the play? It was 19.
No, it was in the early 20s.
Early 20s?
Because my friend's mother is 97 years old now, and she's not in very good shape. Fact is, she's got dementia very bad. But she was in that play, and she's 97 years old.
Can you, just to kind of, a lot of people don't know about that, so I kind of want to get that in there, set the record straight. Can you start maybe with something there's been a lot of talk about a curse of Cornstalk, but people who know better kind of have traced back that it's kind of started not the day Cornstalk died, but this thing actually started in 1920 or a play that somebody kind of threw that in there to make it a better story.
Yeah, that's essentially what happened. I've heard it said like this. The curse is something like Bigfoot. Hey, if you got advertisement, you can advertise it by a myth, and that's just about what Cornstalk's curse was. And the play that was presented in the early 20s depicted Cornstalk's curse, and that's essentially how it started. It was through a play here in Point Pleasant.
Do you think for people like townspeople, people that believe in the curse, do you think they're just looking for something to blame for all the misfortunes that have happened here? Is that what they're looking to do?
Well, when the bridge fell, that was a chain link construction. It was called I-bars, and there was a pin probably 12 inches in diameter that held them together. Well, I don't know how Cornstalk could have vibrated that pin out of that bridge to cause it to fall. So there's nothing to that, as far as a lot of us think here in town that it's a joke, the Cornstalk's curse.
But for those that do believe in it, it's kind of like they're just looking for something to blame. Maybe, right?
Oh, probably. They're just, sensationalism, it's just something that I don't know. I can't remember talking to anybody that really believes that there's a Cornstalk curse.
Were you living in the area when the bridge fell?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little about that? What happened? What it was like to be, a lot of people know about what happened. Tell me what it's like to be from the perspective of someone that was, here in the area.
I was putting up Christmas decorations, and my cousin's wife came by and said, the Silver Bridge just fell. And I turned around and I said, "You're kidding me." She said, "No, John," said, "the bridge has fallen. And they don't know how many people it was on it. The traffic was back clear across on the lane going toward Ohio. It was full. There was a light on each end of the bridge, and it was 5 o'clock in the evening or so, and there was a lot of workers on the bridge too, coming from the Marietta Manufacturing Company when it fell. At the time, they were building the Racine locks and dams up in Racine, Ohio, and the company, the Draveau company, came down here with their big cranes and started removing the debris. I didn't come to town. I didn't come down for about 3 days afterwards. I didn't think, I thought they was too busy down here for me to try to get my car down here and to see what was going on. I lost a lot of good friends on the bridge. And you talk to anybody that was in line to go across that bridge, they were just about on it. They'll say, "Well, I was just about on the bridge when it fell." But there was 46 people died on that bridge when it fell. 2 of the bodies had never been found. A little girl by the name of Kathy Bias and Victor Turner, which was a businessman here in town. It was a terrible thing. They had pictures, in the papers of semi-trailers floating down the river. Families, the young children and husbands and wives, and then they would interview those people. I couldn't believe that they would interview, and some of the questions that they'd ask the people that was on the bridge had survived.
This goes to show that the news back then was as bad as it is now.
That's right. One of the things that they asked, there was a fellow laying in the hospital, and then the reporter said, "When was the last time you saw your wife?" I couldn't get over that. When was the last time you saw your wife?
They're not human.
No.
I didn't realize you that you were so knowledgeable about the bridge. I wasn't going to ask you about that. Can I ask you a few more questions about the bridge?
Well, if I know it, I'll be glad to answer.
Can you just tell me about the bridge falling? It was a tragedy for the community because it's a pretty small town and kind of everyone knows everybody, and it's kind of like pretty much everyone has some kind of connection to someone on the bridge, like either a friend there or a relative. Can you just talk about that being a small town and just how traumatic that incident was because it affected everyone?
Well, some of my very best friends lost their parents on the bridge. In a small community, everybody knows everybody. You're right. Especially, I grew up in Point Pleasant. I delivered papers here. I knew all the families, about all the families in town at one time. But there was people that died on the bridge that I had known all my life. And I knew the families, and I attended a lot of funerals. I worked with some of the men that died on the bridge. It was a tragedy, very, very much so. To this day, you can go over here to the River Museum right here, and they have a mock-up of it, of how the cars were and the tractor and trailers and all that stuff. And every time you see that, you start thinking back, well, what was I doing that day? And I was putting up Christmas decorations when it fell. It's still unbelievable that something that big would fall. They said it, when the pin came out, they surmised that the bridge, well, the people that I witnessed it, said that the bridge kind of tipped one side and then it just rolled over. And when it did, it dumped all the cars. And the concrete flooring in it then, see, lit on some of the stuff down inside on the riverbed. And that's the reason they had divers in here with those big diesel electric cranes. I can still remember that. I can hear those cranes right now. They had a certain sound about them, and you can you just think back about it, and you can hear those cranes straining to pick that stuff up out of the river.
It's something that's kind of just never forget, I guess.
Oh no.
Can you tell me a little bit about the night that? Was it during the night or during was the early evening, I guess?
Early evening. It was about 5 o'clock or so it fell. Well, they worked all night, trying to get survivors. There was a boat came that tied up right here. It went out and they collected, I don't know how many people they picked out of the river that night. And the water was cold. I mean, very cold at that time of year in October or December.
People that didn't die in the crash, a lot of them frostbite and frozen.
No. They got the survivors out quite quickly, out of the river, because of this boat that tied up here. See, there was a refueling station right here, just right up from the flood wall here, and when the bridge fell, well, they were right there on duty and they seen it. Well, they had their boat out there just that quick, just instantly. They had their boat started out and it was Hartley Marine is what it was.
Can you tell me, I heard that the reason there was so much traffic on the bridge was that I heard a lot of people, West Virginia residents, would go to Ohio to shop there for Christmas because
that's true.
Sales tax, I guess there was no tax on some things. Can you tell me, why was the bridge so congested that night? What were people doing?
Well, a lot of people were going home from work because, a lot of people lived in Ohio that worked in West Virginia. They had the Kaiser aluminum plant that employed thousands up here, and the people would drive across that bridge every day, twice a day. And that's one reason. And of course, the manufacturing companies here in Point Pleasant, a lot of their people lived in Ohio. Of course, there were coaches on there. Coach White was on there. He lost his life. Then the people would shop in Ohio because, not necessarily because of the tax. The taxes, there's no tax on food in Ohio, but just Christmas shopping. People were going Christmas shopping. And probably a lot of them were going over to Ohio to buy food too, to save the sales tax. But it was loaded. The lane from West Virginia to Ohio was just completely bumper to bumper. People had gone through the light here, and was going up the ramp, which didn't fall, going up the ramp when the bridge fell. Some of them, their front tires dropped down whenever the bridge fell. That would have been very frightening.
Yeah. I don't like bridges to begin with. So that's not for me. With coming back to Cornstalk for a minute and the curse a little bit. Can you list some of these things that he's always blamed for? He's blamed for fires. He's blamed for the bridge. He's blamed for the Mothman. Can you just list some of those things? Like, unfortunately, Cornstalk gets blamed for everything around here. And then, if you want to add your opinion on the end of it not being true.
Yeah, Cornstalk's curse is something that everybody thinks about here. When any kind of tragedy at all, that's Cornstalk's curse. If a furniture factory burns, well, Cornstalk had something to do with that. If of course, the bridge fell. That was his curse. Any major disaster of any kind, even not major, well, Cornstalk caused that because he cursed Point Pleasant with 7 bullet holes in him.
I make sure that if my project comes out bad, I'll blame it on Cornstalk.
Yeah, if this interview comes out bad, Cornstalk done it to us again.
Let's see if I have any more questions. A little bit about, you remember the whole, were you here living in the area in like 66, 67? I guess you were because of the bridge, but do you remember all the big bird sightings and the Mothman, things like that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was
if you can remember, just tell me a little about what was going on.
I don't think that was a curse there. I think that they seen something. They seen something, but I'm not sure what they saw.
For someone who's never, who doesn't know yet, can you just tell me, not even related to the curse, but just what was happening? People were seeing a large bird.
Well, that's what a lot of people think. It was just a sandhill crane, because they talked about its eyes glowing. Well, sandhill crane's got red eyes if you shine a light on. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what they saw. At that time, people were seeing a lot of things. But whenever it happened, it was really comical too, because everybody and his brother got in their cars and went up into the old TNT area to search for this Mothman. And of course, nobody saw it. Some people claimed they seen it. Some people claimed that they chased it. Some people say that it killed their animals and different things. But I've grown up here, and I've been in the TNT area all hours, day and night. We used to hunt up there all the time, and I've never seen anything that looked like a Mothman. Fact is, I wouldn't know what a Mothman looked like. I didn't know until Bobby Roach built the statue up here.
Yeah, that's funny. That's like my next question. Even though I know you haven't seen it or anything, but just being in the area and knowing kind of what people were reporting, can you just give me doesn't even have to be like a formal sentence, but can you just describe to me, what were some people describing? Like the red eyes, or the big bird, the large wingspan? Can you just give me like a laundry list of what characteristics people were describing of the Mothman?
Well, I really didn't get into that because I didn't believe that there was such a thing as a Mothman. But it's just like I told you a little while ago. You can write about this stuff, and people can tell you, well, it had red eyes and a long beak, and the wingspan was so many feet, and it could fly really fast, keep up with a 100-mile-an-hour automobile, and I don't know very many birds can fly 100 miles an hour, but that's some of the things that they mentioned that the Mothman could do. I really don't. I can't tell you, but just like I told you before, Bigfoot draws a lot of attention, and so does the Mothman.
And for one more question, for people that really buy into Mothman and things like that in the community, can you tell me, like, during when it happened and even up until now, what are some of the things people have explained it as being? Like, I've heard people say that it was just a bird. People have said that they thought it was an angel. They thought it was a demon. Like, even the credible things and the ridiculous things. What are some things that you have heard? What have people considered that?
I really haven't heard a whole lot about the Mothman, other than when they have the festival here. You can come downtown and there's all kind of stories going on. People dress like the Mothman when they have the festival. But no, I've never heard him say it was an angel. Only thing I've ever heard was it was a bird. That's about the only thing I can tell you about the Mothman.
Okay, great. I think that's everything. Do you think that there's anything that I didn't cover regarding? The things that I'm covering in my project are like Cornstalk, the Battle of Point Pleasant, Silver Bridge, the TNT areas. Is there anything that you think that I left out that you would like to talk about, that it's important about any of that?
Well, a lot of the guys that fought in this battle went on to be Revolutionary War heroes and high-ranking officers in the Revolutionary War. The battle that started here, they fought all the way through it. Some of them fought all the way through it, the Revolutionary War, to get our statehood. And I think that really, if you stop and think about it, when the battle was fought here, those men went on to establish the United States of America, and we can't be too proud of them. I mean, the battle was fought here was the beginning. The last battle fought of the Revolutionary War, do you know where it was fought? Wheeling, West Virginia.
Started and ended.
It started in West Virginia. Well, at that time, it started in Virginia and ended in Virginia.
Started. I think it's great. Is there anything else you think that I left or missed out that you want to add about any of these things we talked about?
Well,
we covered a lot of stuff.
I think that a lot of credit should go to Even Shelby, because he's the guy that took over command after all the leading officers had been killed or wounded. He's the guy that came back and conferred with the General Lewis that if we don't do something, we've got to do something. We've got to try to get around. Because General Lewis, he sent runners all the way to 12 miles up the river, Kanawha River here, to try to get Christian down here in time to help him, But he couldn't get here till midnight, so that's how the battle really ended, was when Evan Shelby sent the three companies, his own company plus the two other companies of men up to behind the Indians at 10th Street, when they came in behind him and they thought that Christian had entered the battle. That's when the Indians left the field of battle. And if you leave the field of battle, the one standing is the winner.
This podcast is a companion piece to the original feature-length documentary film from 2011 of the same title. If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to see the film that started it all by visiting www.eyesofthemothman.com.
Just remind me, what's your connection to all this? How did you? Is it just from growing up in the community that you become so knowledgeable? What's your connection to all this, and also with the organization that you're with?
Oh well, I got interested in the Battle of Point Pleasant, and several years ago. My mother was superintendent here for 25 years at the park, and there be thousands and thousands of people every year. A lot of times we come down and just talk to the people that come in on the boats, they'll stop and talk to them and explain the Battle of Point Pleasant and what we think happened and why it happened. And that's how I really got interested in it. And I read a lot about it from different books. I have the Annals of Augusta County. I've read it several times. And the Virgil Lewis, who was a historian, his state historian in 1909, his book, I've read a lot about it. And then, of course, Olivia Simpson Nye, who was essentially the regent of the chapter of the DAR chapter that wanted this monument in this park in the first place. I've read her book. I've got a copy of her book, and things that you just get interested in things like this. For a long time, Tuwindui, we didn't know what Tuwindui meant. They said it was a Shawnee word that meant the mingling of two waters, but that's not really what it was. It's a Wyandot word, and it means a peninsula between a point between the two rivers. Now, how they got the name Tuwindui was the Colonel Charles Lewis chapter of the DAR was trying to get a name for the park. When they had an Indian agent by the name of Johnson, Charles Johnson came in here. He'd been an Indian agent out in Ohio with the Wyandots for about 50 years. And he came in and spoke to the ladies and told them that he mentioned Tuwindui, and they wanted to know what that was. So he explained it to them, and they said, well, that's what we're going to name the park. So that's how Tuwindui was named. But it's not a Shawnee word, it's a Wyandot word. I belong to the National Society Sons of the American Revolution, which is the brothers of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And I'm the president of the state chapter, or state society now. And that means I do a lot of traveling and talking about history to different chapters in the state. I've just been in office now for a little over a month. So I'm just getting started.
How's it going?
So far, so good.
Well, you definitely seem capable of handling it. I mean,
well, I was the secretary for almost 9 years, secretary for the society.
Oh.
So
more than ready.
Yeah, I know about everybody.
Yeah. Before I change the shot, can you just spell your name for me so I make sure I spell it correctly?
My name is my full name is John H. Sauer, Sauer. It's a German name. Of course, I'm a descendant of the Schley family and of Fredericktown, Maryland. So that's where my German ancestors come from, which were a Revolutionary War contributor. He was an old man. He's one of the founders of Frederick, Maryland, and he supplied guns for the Revolution.
Cool. So you're a Hessian?
No, not a Hessian. There was a lot of Hessians fought there, and a lot of them stayed here after the war.
Are there any organizations that trace their ancestry back to British?
Yes, there are. We'll go to, just like he was talking about going to Guilford Courthouse. When you go to Guilford Courthouse, they'll have a battle down there. It's a huge battle. This year, I'm not sure how many reenactors was there, but when you stood and watched them march off of the field, there was 5 abreast, and I'd say it must have been a quarter of a mile, those people coming off of that battlefield. And then you see the British come off. The British they all march together, and there'd be hundreds of them British that reenact the British part of it. It's very fascinating. If you ever get a chance, go down there and march to see that. It'd be worth filming.
When was that?
It happens about the 15th of March every year at the Guilford Courthouse National Park.
I had a reenaction that actually about 6 or 7 Germans.
Well, I'll tell you what. Now, you mentioned the Hessians. Down at the Guilford Courthouse, they'll have Hessian units in there. They won't talk to you unless you can speak German. They all speak German. It's unbelievable. A friend of mine, a fellow by the name of Eddie Good, he's a tremendous fifer. And they'll get him into their Hessian group. He can speak German. Well, his last name is Good, Goode. But anyway, when you go down there, he'll speak to you in German till you walk out of their camp. Then he'll start talking in our tongue, but it's unbelievable. Those guys will be walking around there talking to each other in the German language.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're done.
I just have one question.
Yeah, sure.
And you can answer to him and look at him and answer. The guys who killed Cornstalk,
Yes.
they were doing it for revenge. And you know their names. I think you said their names. But did anything happen to these guys? Were they reprimanded? Were they anything?
I just know one of the names right now offhand. I'd have to research and get them all, but
One's
the Gilbreth was one of them's name, and he was his family was at Muddy Creek when Cornstalk massacred them. But what essentially started the whole thing was the two fellows went across here, and the Indians killed one of them, and the other one came back and said, "Hey, the Indians killed so and so," and so they said, "Well, let's go kill. We got some Indians. Let's go kill them," and that's what they did. They went up and. The commander of the fort, Arbuckle, he said he tried to stop them, but that you couldn't stop them. And they had orders not to go across the river, but the two men did. And when they did, the Indians killed one of them and came back, and then they murdered Cornstalk, Red Hawk, and Ypsilanti.
Can you tell me that again? So Cornstalk actually wasn't even like. It's kind of a weird way to meet his death. He died.
It was murder.
Personal vendetta for this one person. Can you tell me that?
It was murder when they killed Cornstalk. They actually murdered the man. He was in jail. I mean, they had him locked up. He came over here to tell them that there's going to be an Indian uprising, trying to stick with the treaty that he had signed with John Murray, the Lord Dunmore, and they murdered him. Of course, the two men that murdered him that they tried. They were acquitted because there was no witnesses that would testify for the Indians. That's about really all I know about it.
We were talking earlier about Cornstalk being this kind of warrior, kind of a man of honor, and really, really well respected. Is it kind of ironic and unfortunate that someone like him who maybe deserves an honorable death, like on the field of battle, doesn't get it? Can you talk a little bit about that? Cornstalk's this great warrior. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a death that kind of fits his character.
Well, it's said that when his son Ypsilanti came over to talk to him to be with his father, and they locked him up too, that they talked about if they died, well, they're ready to die. They knew that it might happen, and so they talked about it that they may die, and unfortunately they did. I don't think it was right the way they. Of course, back then, I mean, they were just three Indians, and they just took them out here and buried them in an open spot, and they laid there for many, many years, until they finally they were going to exhume the bodies, and no one knew where they were, and there just happened to be some fella here in town that had been here when they were killed, and told them exactly where they were, and it was actually by an alley, and they dug up the bones and took them to their courthouse for another grave that was neglected, and then finally the town fathers decided that they had put the monument up for him. Well, the old courthouse sat on the very corner of 6th and Vian Street. The first building there was a clerk's office, then the courthouse. Well, the courthouse had a courtyard, and the courtyard had a walkway that walked through. Instead of going around the corner, you could walk through that. And that's where they put the monument. They put the monument right there where you'd have to walk around it to get on Main Street. And it was there until in the 50s, around 53 and 54, they built a new courthouse. And they dug up, they moved the monument and took the bones and put them in a little box and brought them down. And my mother, I've got pictures of my mother placing the bones under the monument, and then they set the monument.
Well, so your mother was actually involved?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
See, the Colonel Charles Lewis chapter is very, very active here. a bunch of great ladies started this back in years ago. They tried to get enough money to build the park. And so Colonel Charles Lewis chapter, which my mother is a 57-year member now, and she was involved whenever she was the chapter regent whenever that was done, and the DAR ladies was very much involved in moving and bringing the monument down here. They were also very involved in the building of the park, per se, all of the park. They are the state. The state sends the superintendent in for the park, but the DAR ladies are the ones that sit in there every day and tell people what things are and about the different monuments. Now, the monument on the other side over here, the magazine monument, the local chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution installed that about 6 years ago or so. I didn't tell you about the magazine. After the battle was over, well, you know, the magazine, they had the place where they could keep their powder and their flour and everything dry. Well, after the battle was over, they took the officers and the gentlemen and they buried them in the magazine. So that's the reason we have the monument called the magazine for the gentlemen and the officers. Now, another story I could tell you is about John Frog. John Frog was a sutler, and he was also a family member of the Lewises, and he came over here and he dressed flamboyant. He wore a hat that had feathers and ribbons in it, and the day of the battle, that night, his daughter, which was a very young girl, had a bad dream that her father was being killed by the Indians. She didn't have it once, she had it 3 times. And it's noted in the annals of Augusta County that this happened. This little girl dreamed this, and her mother kept saying, no, it's not true. But come to find out, her father was killed at the same time she was having this dream. And I thought that was ironic that the little girl would have a dream that her father was being killed, and he was. So he was buried in the magazine also.
Can you tell me once more? So it's weird. You actually have so much connected with you, but your mother actually was involved in the moving of Cornstalk's remains.
Yes, she was.
Can you start with that? Like, actually, you know,
the moving of Cornstalk's remains from the old courthouse square down to the park here. The DAR ladies had in charge of that, moving the monument and everything. And the pictures that we have shows the ladies there placing the bones in the grave underneath the monument.
Can you tell me actually that just so people know that you're part of that group? Please, can you actually say, actually my mother actually lent a hand in the movement?
Oh, my mother actually placed the bones in the grave. It was a big ceremony at the time, They were honoring Cornstalk at that time, to bring him in here. It's fascinating to me that they still honor the man whenever you go out there. And the first time I saw that field blossom burning out there, I went into the park superintendent and I said, hey, somebody's burning something out there. And he said, they do that all the time. He said that they're paying homage to Cornstalk, the Shawnee Nation.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Eyes of the Mothman, the podcast. For more information about our program, or to find out where you can watch the original documentary film or purchase a limited edition signed DVD copy, please visit www.eyesofthemothman.com.